on the morning of May 19, 1780, a farmer in Hartford County, Connecticut, stepped out of his small wooden house and looked up at a sky the color of old brass. Before we go any further into this story, if you want a brand new American mystery every single night, subscribe. One tap and a new story is waiting for you every evening. Now back to that farmer, standing on his porch with a tin cup of coffee gone cold in his hand, watching a sun that did not seem to rise the way a sun should rise. The light around him was strange, not gray like a storm, not gold like a normal dawn. It was something else, something the old folks would later struggle to describe in their letters. Some said it looked like the inside of a copper kettle. Some said it looked like the world had been dipped in weak tea. The grass in the meadow glowed a sickly green. The bark on the maples turned a soft, unfamiliar yellow, and the shadows under the apple trees stretched long and wrong, as if the sun were setting at 6 in the morning. The farmer set down his cup. He walked out into his field. The air was warm and still, and it smelled faintly of wood smoke, though no chimney for miles was lit. His cows had stopped chewing. They stood in a loose circle, ears up, staring at nothing. Somewhere in the woods beyond the stone wall, a single crow called once, then went silent. By 9 in the morning, the sky began to thicken. By 10, it had begun to close. By 11, lamps were burning in kitchens from Maine to New Jersey. By noon, in towns that had never needed candles in daylight, candles were the only thing keeping people from bumping into the furniture. Roosters crowed as if dawn had come a second time. Bats wheeled out of barn rafters and flickered across porches. Whippoorwills, those shy little birds that sing only at dusk, started up their sad evening songs 3 hours before lunch. And nobody knew why. This is the story of the dark day of 1780. It is one of the strangest entries in the American record, and one of the most stubbornly unsolved. For more than 200 years, people have tried to explain what happened on that quiet spring Friday in New England. They have written books. They have studied tree rings. They have measured ash. They have argued about volcanoes and wildfires and eclipses and the slow drifting smoke of a far-off catastrophe. And still, the answer slips through their fingers like fog through a wooden fence. What we know is this. On May 19, 1780, somewhere between 9 and 10 in the morning, the sky over a great stretch of the American Northeast went dark. Not cloudy, not overcast, dark. Dark enough that a man holding a sheet of white paper an inch from his nose could not see the paper. Dark enough that birds went to roost. Dark enough that fish stopped biting. Dark enough that grown men, hardened by war and weather, fell to their knees in the muddy roads outside their churches and asked God what they had done wrong. It was, you have to remember, a time when omens still mattered. The revolution was raging. Cannon smoke still hung in the memory of every porch. Folks read meaning into comets and frosts and the shapes of clouds. So when the sun went out at midday, over 100,000 square miles of farmland, people did not reach for a scientific explanation. They reached for their Bibles. Some thought it was the end of the world. Some thought it was the wrath of heaven against a young nation at war. Some thought it was a warning. Some calmer souls simply lit a candle, opened a journal, and began to write down everything they saw, hour by hour. As the day grew darker than night, those journals survive. So do the sermons. So do the letters and the legislative records and the half-burned almanacs. And from them, we can piece together a story so peculiar that even now, scientists and historians sit around the same question the Hartford farmer asked when he set down his coffee. What darkened the sky? What stole the noon? And why, in all the long, quiet centuries since, has no other day in American history quite matched it? Sit a while. Get comfortable. The fire is warm and the night is long. We have a strange day to walk through together, and the sun, when it rises in our story, is going to forget how to shine. Picture New England in the spring of 1780. The land is just waking up. Snow still hides in the deep shadows of the pine woods where the sun cannot reach. The streams run high and cold with melt, tumbling down stone beds that have not seen sunlight since November. The maples have begun to leaf out in soft pale green, and the apple trees in the dooryards are heavy with white blossoms. The air smells of wet earth, wood smoke, and turned soil. This is a world lit by fire. Every kitchen has a hearth blackened by 100 winters of cooking. Every barn has a lantern hung by the door, its tin sides punched with little stars to let the candlelight through. At night, the towns go dark in a way we can barely imagine now. The only glow comes from windows, and the windows are small, and the candles inside them are precious. People go to bed early. They rise before the sun. Their days are measured by light. The houses are mostly built of wood, weathered to the color of old bone. They sit low to the ground, with thick chimneys of fieldstone running up through the middle. The roofs are steep, made to shed snow. The doors are heavy slabs of pine, hung on iron hinges forged by the village blacksmith. Inside, the floors are wide boards, pegged down with wooden nails, soft and warm under stocking feet. The rooms are small and dim. The ceilings press low overhead. A loaf of bread, a string of dried apples, a smoked ham hanging from a beam. These are the riches of an ordinary kitchen. Outside, the fields stretch in long ribbons between the stone walls. Those walls run for thousands of miles across New England, piled up by farmers who picked the rocks out of their plowed ground one season at a time. The walls are mossy now, settled into the land like they grew there. Sheep graze among them, their wool still thick from the cold months. Oxen drag the wooden plows through the loam. The plows themselves are simple things, more wood than iron, sharpened by hand at the edge of the share. The people who live here wear linen and wool. The men have rough breeches buttoned at the knee, and long stockings, and shoes with plain pewter buckles. They wear waistcoats and broad-brimmed hats of felted beaver fur. The women wear long skirts and aprons, with linen caps tied under their chins. The children dress like small copies of their parents. Everything is made by hand. A shirt takes weeks. A pair of stockings takes longer. Nothing is wasted, and nothing is thrown away. It is the 5th year of the Revolutionary War. The fighting has moved south now, into the Carolinas and Virginia, but New England remembers. The men of these towns marched at Lexington and conquered. They froze at Valley Forge. They buried their sons at Bunker Hill. The war has left the country tired and poor, with paper money that nobody trusts and prices that rise every week. There are widows in every village. There are empty chairs at every supper table. The people are deeply religious in a way that is hard to describe to a modern ear. They read the Bible aloud by candlelight. They go to meeting on Sunday and sit on hard wooden benches for 3 hours at a stretch. Their ministers preach about providence, the idea that God moves through the weather and the harvest, through sickness and good fortune, through every small thing. When something strange happens in the sky, they look up and ask what it means. They expect signs. They watch for them. The towns themselves are small clusters around a common green. There is a meeting house with a square steeple painted white. There is a tavern with a swinging sign. There is a smithy, a grist mill turning by the creek, a few shops along a dirt road that turns to mud when it rains. The roads wind out into the countryside, past the farms, past the woodlots, past the swamps where the peepers sing in the warm evenings. Beyond the farms, the great forests still stand. Old growth, hemlock and white pine 200 feet tall, with trunks wider than a wagon. This is the world on the night of May 18, 1780. The candles flicker low. The cows are settled in their stalls. The frogs sing in the marshes. Somewhere up in the north, far beyond the maps these people carry in their heads, something is already moving. Something is already on the wind. But here, tonight, the New England towns go to sleep beneath an ordinary sky. Before the sky turned strange, the people of New England were just people. Farmers and millers, wives and widows, boys with calloused hands and girls who knew the names of every chicken in the yard. To understand what happened on that copper-colored morning, you have to know who was there to see it. You have to picture them in their kitchens and their fields, in their meeting houses and their narrow wooden streets, going about a Friday like any other. Picture a man named Samuel Tenney in Exeter, New Hampshire. He was a doctor, 32 years old, with steady hands and a careful way of speaking. He kept a journal in tight, slanted ink. Every morning, he rose before the sun. He brewed strong tea over a low fire. He set out across the muddy spring roads to visit the sick, his leather bag swinging at his side. Tenny noticed things. He noticed the color of a fever. He noticed the way wind moved through the elm trees. On this Friday morning, he would notice something stranger than he had ever written about. Down in Connecticut, in a town called Stamford, an older man named Abraham Davenport stood at his window before dawn. He was 65. His coat was dark wool. His hair was gray and tied at the neck, and his face was the face of a man who had spent his whole life making hard decisions. Davenport was a colonel and a councilman and a judge all at once. He believed in duty the way other men believed in God. He carried a small leather Bible in his coat pocket and a pewter snuff box in the other. He walked with a slight limp from a horse fall years before. On this Friday, he would say words that school children in New England would still repeat 100 years later. Out past the salt marshes of Massachusetts, a fisherman named Ezra Stiles Gannett mended his nets on the dock at Ipswich. The rope was rough on his palms. The gulls cried overhead in their lazy circles. He smelled the morning tide, briny and cold, and watched the gray water turn slowly pink in the rising light. Sailors gathered near him, smoking clay pipes, swapping news of British ships and of cousins gone south to fight. They did not yet know that by noon they would be on their knees on the wet planks, weeping, certain the world had ended. In a farmhouse outside Hartford, a woman named Mehitable Parsons was already at work. She had 4 children, a husband off with the militia, and 20 cows that needed milking before the dew lifted. Her hands were strong. Her apron was streaked with butter and ash. She moved through the dim barn in her wooden clogs, the lantern swinging from her wrist, and she sang under her breath to keep the youngest cows calm. Mehitable was the kind of woman who never sat down. By that afternoon, she would sit. She would gather her children in her lap, and she would sit very still. A preacher named Nathan Williams stood in his small parsonage in Toland, reading by candlelight. He was 41. His sermons were long and careful, and he wrote them out in full, every word on rough paper sewn together with thread. That morning, he was writing about the book of Joel. He did not know that the verses he was choosing would feel, by sundown, like prophecy. The candle guttered beside him. The window glass showed the faintest blush of dawn. He dipped his quill and kept writing. These were the people: a doctor with a journal, a judge with a snuff box, a fisherman mending rope, a farm wife in the barn, a preacher at his desk. Multiply them by 10,000. Spread them across the long green spine of New England, from the Penobscot down to the Long Island Sound. Put them in their kitchens. Put them in their boats. Put them on their stone-walled farms, where the apple trees were just beginning to bloom, and the lilacs were heavy and purple in the dooryard. They were tired people. They were stubborn people. They had been at war for 5 years, and they had buried sons, and they had patched their coats more times than they could count. They believed in signs, in dreams, in the slow turning of the seasons. They believed that the natural world spoke if you knew how to listen. On the morning of May 19, 1780, the natural world began to speak, and the sky, just after sunrise, turned the color of old copper held too long in the fire. And these were the people who looked up. In the days before the strange morning, life in New England moved at the pace of slow water. Farmers rose with the first gray light. Wives tended fires that had been banked low through the night. Children fetched water from wells, while their bare feet skimmed the cool spring grass. The world was simple and round and known. You could hear the bells before you saw the cows. Each animal wore a small iron bell around its neck, hand-shaped at a village forge. The bells made a soft music that drifted across pastures, telling a farmer where his herd had wandered. A man could be plowing a back field and still know, just by listening, that his milkers had moved toward the apple trees. Houses sat low and square against the land. Most were built of rough pine planks, weathered to the color of soft ash. Roofs were steep, made to throw off snow. Chimneys stood thick and central, like the spine of each home, and smoke rose from them in thin blue ribbons, even on warm mornings. Inside, the rooms smelled of dried herbs and wood ash, and the slow steam of bean pots left to cook all day. Mornings began with the rooster. He stood on the fence post or the wood pile, puffed his chest, and let loose his rough cry just as the eastern sky turned the color of a peach. The hens stirred. The dog by the hearth lifted his head. A boy somewhere groaned and pulled the wool blanket over his face. This was the alarm clock of New England, and it had not changed in 100 years. Breakfast came early and plain. Cornmeal mush in a wooden bowl. A drizzle of molasses if the family had any left from winter. Sometimes a slice of salt pork. Tea was a luxury, and after the war began, it was almost a memory. Coffee was rare. Most folks drank cider, even children, because cider kept where milk did not. Outside, the world wore its softest green. May in New England has a tender, almost shy beauty. The maples had just put out their first true leaves, pale as new lettuce. The birches showed pale gold catkins. Lilacs were swelling toward bloom, and the air around them smelled faintly of honey. Stone walls ran across the hills like long gray seams, mossy on their north faces, warm to the touch on their south. The roads were dirt, rutted by wagon wheels and softened by spring rain. A traveler on horseback moved through tunnels of overhanging green. Streams ran high and clear with snowmelt from the inland hills. Trout flickered in the shallows like quick silver coins. Frogs sang at dusk so loudly that you could hear them through closed shutters. In the towns, life had its own quiet rhythm. The blacksmith's hammer rang out from sunrise to sundown, a steady iron heartbeat. The cooper bent wet oak staves over his knee. The miller dusted his hair white with flour. Children carried sacks of grain on small shoulders and ran home with pennies for candy at the general store. Old men sat on benches outside the meeting house and argued about the war, about the price of nails, about the weather. The weather, always the weather. Farmers watched the sky the way sailors watch the sea. They knew the shapes of rain clouds and the meaning of a red sunset. They knew that mares' tails high up meant wind by morning. They knew when a storm was coming because the cattle would lie down in the pasture and the dogs would press close to the kitchen door. Reading the sky was a survival skill, learned young, sharpened over a lifetime. Sundays brought the meeting house. Families walked or drove wagons along the dirt lanes, dressed in their best dark wool. The minister stood at a high pulpit and preached for 2 hours, maybe 3. Folks sang hymns from memory because few of them could read music. After service, they lingered outside, sharing news, trading gossip, learning who had married, who had died, who had taken sick. Night fell slow and complete. There were no streetlights, no glow on the horizon from distant cities. When the sun went down behind the western hills, the dark that followed was a real dark, an honest dark, broken only by the yellow squares of candlelit windows. Stars came out in numbers we have mostly forgot. The Milky Way stretched overhead like spilled cream. This was the world in early May of 1780. Steady, familiar, lit by sun and candle and moon in their proper turns. Nobody in those quiet farmhouses knew that the order of light itself was about to break. The wind shifted just before 10 in the morning. It came in slow at first, the way a cat walks across a wooden floor, soft and careful, as if it didn't want to be noticed. Folks working in their yards lifted their heads. The men splitting wood paused mid-swing. The women hanging laundry on the lines felt the breeze touch the backs of their necks, and they paused too, clothespins still pinched between their fingers. The wind carried something with it. It smelled like a forest on fire. Not the warm, friendly smell of a hearth, not the sweet curl of pipe smoke, or the homey scent of a kitchen stove. This was different. This was deeper. It was the sharp tang of burning pine, of resin boiling out of bark, of green wood crackling open in a heat that should not have been anywhere near them. The smell rolled across the hills like a slow tide. It slipped between the barns. It crept under doorways and through the cracks in cabin walls. People stepped outside to find where it was coming from. They looked north. They looked west. They turned slow circles in their dooryards, sniffing the air like deer. No smoke rose from any neighbor's chimney that could explain it. No bonfire crackled in any clearing. The fields were green and damp from spring rain. The nearby woods stood quiet, full of new leaves, the kind of woods that would not catch fire on a cool May morning, even if a man tried to light them. Yet the smell grew stronger. A boy named Eli was walking a milk pail back from a neighbor's barn when he first noticed it. He told the story for the rest of his long life. He said the air went heavy all at once. He said it pressed down on his shoulders like a wet wool blanket. The trees along the road stood too still. The birds had gone quiet, and the only sound was the squeak of the pail handle in his hand and the slow, soft tread of his bare feet on the dirt road. He stopped walking. He turned in place, and he saw a stranger standing at the bend in the road, an old man with a long coat the color of river mud, watching him with eyes that did not blink. The old man lifted his nose to the wind. Then he spoke, soft as a sigh, words Eli would remember word for word until his dying day. The woods up north are walking down to us. Eli did not know what to say. He stood there with the pail held against his hip. The milk inside it had gone still, no longer sloshing, as if the world itself had paused to listen. The old man turned without another word and walked off into the trees beside the road, his coat moving slow through the underbrush. And then he was gone, and Eli was alone again, with the smell of burning pine pressing against his face. He ran the rest of the way home. Other people felt it too. In the town of Hartford, a blacksmith stepped out of his shop and stood in the open street with his apron streaked in soot. He sniffed at the air. He shook his head. He told the man working the bellows that something was wrong in the woods, and he didn't know what, but it was wrong. In Boston, a sailor on the dock paused while coiling rope. He had spent half his life at sea. He knew the smells of every kind of weather. This one did not belong to any of them. A woman in Rhode Island wrote in her diary that morning. The page survives in a museum case. The ink faded to the color of weak tea. She wrote that the air tasted of cinders. She wrote that her youngest daughter began to cry without any reason, hiding her face in her mother's apron, and would not say why. The smell thickened as the morning moved on. It rolled across the rooftops of villages from New Hampshire down to the Connecticut River Valley. It drifted through orchards where apple trees stood in early pink bloom. It curled around the white steeples of country churches and slipped beneath the eaves of meeting houses. Horses pulled at their tethers. Dogs whined at doors. Somewhere far off, geese cried out, flying south when they should have been flying north. Their voices ragged and confused. No one yet looked up at the sky. The sky was still doing its quiet work, slow and patient, gathering something that nobody on the ground had thought to fear. The smell came first. The smell was the warning. Whatever was coming, the wind knew it already. By 8 in the morning, the candles came out of the drawers. Wives reached into the wooden boxes where tallow tapers waited for winter nights. They struck flint and steel at the breakfast table, and small yellow flames bloomed beside plates of Johnny cake and salt pork. The light felt wrong against the windows. Outside, the sky pressed down the color of an old penny, and inside, the kitchens glowed like little churches at vespers. Children stared at the flames, and then at their parents. Mothers tried to keep their voices steady. A man named Ebenezer Stiles, by his own diary, lit 3 candles before he could read the page of his own ledger book. The ink swam in the brown half-light. He wrote that it felt like eating supper in the middle of the day. Only supper had not been cooked, and the morning had not been finished. In the villages, neighbors began to drift outside, drawn together the way people are drawn together when something they cannot name is wrong. They stood in the rutted lanes with shawls pulled tight, looking up. The clouds did not move like normal clouds. They hung low and yellow-brown, the color of pipe smoke trapped in a tavern. The general stores filled up first. In small towns, the general store was the heart of everything. A low building of dark planks with barrels of flour by the door and tin lanterns hanging from the rafters. By mid-morning, the benches outside were full. Men leaned on the porch rails, chewing tobacco slow, trying to look calm. Women came in for thread they did not need, just to hear what people were saying. An old man named Josiah, who had farmed the same hill for 60 years, said he remembered something like this back in '56. A dimming, he called it, but not so deep. He said the air had smelled the same then, of burnt sap and far-off pine. He had been a young man working his father's barn, and the cattle had grown nervous all afternoon. He said his father had crossed himself, though they were not Catholic, and had simply gone inside to read the Bible. Another voice said his grandmother had seen the sun turn green once. Off the coast of Maine, the year a comet rode the sky. A third said his uncle in Vermont had spoken of a yellow day in 1762, when the snow lay strange and pink on the fields the morning after. Each story added a thread. None of them matched, and yet all of them rhymed. At the tavern, where the talk ran looser, the theories grew bolder. The keep poured cider into pewter cups and listened. One man swore it was the smoke of a great battle, some fight from the war drifting north on the wind. Another said it was the smoke of the burning of New York itself, though New York had not burned that week. A trapper just down from the North Country said he had seen the woods aflame in places he could not name. Fires that crept across the moss and gave off pale smoke that climbed straight up like the chimney of God. On the church steps, the conversation took a different shape. Ministers stood in their black coats and watched the sky with quiet faces. Some held the door open for parishioners who had come without being called. In Hartford, in Boston, in small meeting houses along the Connecticut River, people gathered without knowing exactly why. They sat in the pews and listened to the silence. A few opened their psalm books, but could not read them in the murk. Old women in lace caps muttered the older words. Some said it was a sign. Some said the witches were stirring, the way they had stirred in their grandmother's time. Others remembered the dark winter of 1716, when the snow had fallen black for 2 days running, and people had told stories of seeing horses with hooves that left no print. The folklore came up from the floorboards like damp. At a crossroads in Massachusetts, a peddler with a cart full of tin cups and ribbon claimed he had ridden through 3 towns that morning and heard 3 different explanations. Comet ash, he said, the breath of a sleeping mountain, the judgment promised in the book of Joel. He smiled when he said it, but his eyes kept drifting up. Nobody had the whole story. Each voice held a corner of it, and the corners did not fit. The candles flickered on the breakfast tables. The roosters had stopped crowing, and somewhere out beyond the hills, the sky kept thickening, the color deepening from copper into something closer to bronze. As the morning that had refused to begin slid quietly toward a noon that would never arrive. understand what the farmers saw that morning, you have to step back a long way, long before the dark day, long before the muskets and the meeting houses, long before the stone walls that still cut through the New England woods like old scars. The land itself remembers things that people forget. The fields where those farmers stood in May of 1780 had not always been fields. Most of them had been forest only a generation or two before. Old oaks, old chestnuts, old white pines, so tall the British Navy had marked the best ones with a broad arrow and saved them for ship masts. The settlers had cleared this land with axes and oxen and patience. They pulled the stumps. They dragged the rocks. They planted rye and corn and flax in soil that had never known a plow. But the people who came before knew the soil very well. The Pequot, the Mohegan, the Nipmuc, the Wampanoag, the Abenaki up in the North Country. They had walked these hills for thousands of years. They had stories about the sky going strange. They had words for days the sun forgot to shine. The farmers in those fields on May 19th did not know most of those stories. Not really. A few old neighbors might have traded a word or two across a fence line. A few traders along the rivers might have heard a tale by a fire. But most of the deeper memory of the land had already gone quiet by 1780. Pushed west, pushed under, pushed into silence by war and sickness and broken treaties. Still, the farmers felt something in their bones that morning. You can read it in their letters. You can read it in the diaries kept by their wives in tidy slanted ink. They wrote that the day did not feel new. They wrote that the day felt like something that had happened before, somewhere, to someone. There were older dark days in the records, if you looked for them. The settlers had been keeping notes for over a century. In 1716, a strange dimness had passed over parts of New England. The sky going the color of weak tea for a few hours. In 1762, a similar gloom had settled briefly over the Connecticut River Valley, thick enough that the schoolmasters sent the children home. These were smaller events, half forgotten, tucked into the back pages of almanacs between the moon charts and the planting tables. The farmers who stood in their fields on May 19th would have heard whispers of those older days from their fathers and grandfathers. kind of stories told only when the harvest was in and the cider was strong. Stories that began. My grandfather once told me of a morning that did not come. And the native stories went back further still. The Abenaki spoke of times when the sun hid its face, when smoke rolled down from the great northern forests like a gray river. The Algonquin peoples had names for the seasons when the air itself turned to ash, when the fish tasted of soot, when the deer fled south with their coats smelling of burnt cedar. The big fires up in the boreal woods were not strangers to the people who lived nearest them. They were old visitors. They had names. The farmers in 1780 did not have those names. They had Bibles and almanacs and the sermons of their ministers. So when they stood among their young corn shoots and watched the light drain from the world, they reached for the words they had been taught. Judgment, wrath, sign, wonder. They reached for the language of revelation because nobody had given them the language of wildfire smoke traveling 600 miles on a southern wind. You can picture them out there, boots sunk in the soft black earth, hats pulled low against a sky the color of bruised peach skin. The young leaves on the corn standing perfectly still because there was almost no wind down at ground level. The far line of trees turning into a smudge. The hills they had known their whole lives going faint as a charcoal drawing left out in the rain. A few of them, the older ones, the ones with longer memories, would have remembered the smoke that drifted south in 1755 after the great fires across the St. Lawrence Valley. They would have remembered the smell. They would have remembered the way the cattle had gone quiet then too. But none of them, not the oldest farmer in the oldest town, had ever seen a morning quite like this one. The land had a memory, and the land had not been this dark in a very long time. In a small town outside Hartford, a farmer named Samuel Tenney leaned on his fence post and watched his cattle come walking up the lane. The sun, or what should have been the sun, hung somewhere behind a wall of copper-colored cloud. His pocket watch said 11:30 in the morning. His cows said it was dusk. They were lowing softly, the way they did at the end of a long summer day, plodding toward the barn with that slow, heavy step they used when the light started to fade. Samuel pulled his watch out twice more, just to be sure. He was not a curious man by nature. He was a practical man, the kind who fixed a broken hinge before breakfast and noted the weather in a small leather book each night. But something about the cows turning themselves home pulled at him like a thread on a loose sleeve. He set down his hoe. He walked back to the house. He told his wife he was going to see what the neighbors were saying. The road into town was empty. Stone walls ran along both sides, mossy and gray, and the dogwoods that should have been bright with bloom looked dull, almost gray themselves. The light had a strange thickness to it, like syrup poured over the fields. Birds sat on the fence rails without singing. A single horse stood in a pasture, head low, tail still. Samuel passed a cherry orchard where the white blossoms looked almost yellow in the strange, dim glow. At the meeting house in the village center, a small knot of men had gathered on the steps. The minister was there. The blacksmith was there. 2 boys held lanterns, even though it was the middle of the day. Samuel learned that the chickens had all gone to roost an hour before. The bats had come out from the church belfry and were already circling. A man from the next farm over said his bees had returned to the hive and sealed themselves inside, the way they did at sunset. Samuel listened, and then he started walking. He wanted to know how far this thing reached. He wanted to ask people he had never met. He took the post road north, and at every farmhouse he passed, the story was the same. The animals had gone home. The wells looked black as ink. Candles burned in every window. A woman in a calico apron told him her sheep had walked themselves into the fold and stood pressed together, trembling. A boy of about 10 said his cat would not come out from under the bed. By mid-afternoon, Samuel had walked nearly 6 miles. The darkness did not lift. If anything, it pressed lower, like a blanket settling over the hills. He stopped at a tavern where 4 men sat with a single candle between them, speaking in low voices. One of them, a peddler who had ridden down from Massachusetts that very morning, said it was the same up there, the same in Worcester, the same in Boston. He had ridden through it for hours and never come out the other side. This was the thing Samuel could not get past. A storm has edges. A cloud has a far side. He had seen eclipses before, and they passed in minutes, the shadow sliding across the land like a hand drawn over a page. This had no edges. This had no movement. This sat on the country like something that had decided to stay. He turned and walked home. The cows were already in the barn. His wife had lit every candle they owned and set them in the windows. She had also, he noticed, taken down the family Bible from the high shelf and laid it open on the table. She did not say why. He did not ask. That night, Samuel sat at the table and tried to write it all down in his weather book. He wrote the time the cows came up the lane. He wrote the names of the towns where the peddler said the darkness lay. He wrote about the bats and the bees and the silent birds. And then he stopped because there was a column in the book for cause, and he could not fill it in. He wrote one word and crossed it out. He wrote another and crossed that out too. In the end, he left the column blank and closed the book and sat staring at the candle until it guttered low. What Samuel Tenney learned that day was not an answer. It was the shape of the question. The darkness was wide. The darkness was still. And whatever had made, it had not bothered to leave a single track behind. The voices from that day still come down to us, carried in old diaries and faded letters, spoken by people who took up pens because they did not know what else to do with their hands. They wrote in shaky lines by candlelight at noon. They wrote like people trying to hold onto something slipping away. And what comes through more than fear is wonder. A farmer named Samuel Tenney, sitting at his kitchen table in Exeter, dipped his quill and wrote that the darkness felt like something solid. He said it pressed against the windows like a hand. He could feel it on his skin, cool and heavy, smelling faintly of smoke. When he held a white sheet of paper close to his face, he could not see it. Not the paper, not his own fingers. Only the small orange tongue of the candle flame told him he still had a world around him. A young woman in Hartford wrote to her sister that morning. She said the chickens had gone to roost and the cat had crawled under the bed. She wrote that she sat by the window with her knitting in her lap, but she could not see the stitches, only feel them. She said the wool felt strange between her fingers, as if her hands belonged to someone else. The world had gone quiet in a way she had no words for, like a held breath, like a room where someone has just stopped speaking. In a meeting house outside Boston, a preacher named Nathaniel Whitaker climbed into the pulpit at midday and looked out over his congregation by the light of 2 thin tapers. He later wrote in his journal that he saw faces he had known for 30 years made strange by the orange glow. His neighbors, his friends, they looked like figures from an old painting. He said he opened his Bible to read, and the words on the page seemed to lift and float, as if the ink were warm. He spoke that day of Joel and Revelation. He spoke of the sun being turned to darkness. But years later, he would write that he did not preach those verses to frighten anyone. He preached them because they were the only words he knew that fit the shape of what he was seeing. A boy of 12 in Rhode Island, whose name was Joseph Pierce, kept a small book all his life. In it he wrote over and over the memory of standing in his father's barn with a lantern and watching the cows lie down in the straw. He said they did not low or stir. They simply folded their legs beneath them and closed their eyes, as cows do at night. He said his father stood next to him and took off his hat slowly, the way a man does in church. They did not speak. They listened to the rain that was not rain, a soft yellow drizzle that smelled of burnt wood. And Joseph wrote that he understood, even at 12, that he was watching something he would carry the rest of his days. A sea captain's wife in Salem said she went out into her garden and held her hand up against the sky. She could see the outline of her palm, but only just. The sky behind it was the color of an old penny left in a drawer. She said the lilacs in her garden seemed to glow from within, their purple gone almost black, their green leaves turned to bronze. She knelt down in the wet grass and prayed, not because she was afraid, but because the world had become so beautiful and so strange, she did not know what else to do. A blacksmith in Worcester told his grandchildren, years and years afterward, about a moment that he never forgot. He said he stood at his forge with the fire roaring, and for the first time in his life, the fire was brighter than the sun. He said he laid down his hammer and walked out into the street, and the whole town was out there with him. hundreds of people standing in the road, looking up. Nobody screamed. Nobody ran. They simply stood with their faces turned toward the copper sky, like sunflowers turned the wrong way. What ties these voices together is not panic. It is something quieter, something closer to awe. They believed, many of them, that the Lord had come to judge the earth. They believed the trumpet might sound at any moment, and still they stood in their gardens. Still, they wrote down what they saw. Still, they reached for each other's hands in the warm orange dark, and they waited to see what the world would do next. By late morning on May 19th, the strangeness had crawled all the way to Hartford. The Connecticut State House stood on its quiet hill, its brick walls catching what little light still hung in the air. Inside, the General Assembly was in session. The men gathered around long oak tables, their papers spread before them like white birds resting on dark water. They had been working since early light, talking of taxes and roads, and the long war still grinding away to the south. Then the room began to dim. At first, the men thought a heavy cloud had drifted over the building. One of them rose to peer through the tall windows, and what he saw made him stand very still. The sky outside was the wrong color. Not gray, not black. A deep, sickly brass, like the inside of an old kettle. The trees along the green had lost their green. The white steeples of the nearby churches had turned the color of bone soaked in tea. A clerk lit a candle, then another. Soon the long room glowed with small yellow flames, and the men's faces hovered above them like moons. Outside, you could hear horses whinnying in the streets, confused, stamping at the cobblestones. Somewhere, a dog began to howl, and another answered, and another, until the whole town seemed to be singing a low, strange song. Word spread through the chamber in whispers. Word from a traveler who had ridden in from Springfield. Word from a farmer who had come down from Litchfield. Word from a sailor who had docked that morning at New Haven. All of them telling the same story. All of them describing the same sky. The darkness was not a Hartford problem. It stretched from the coast of Maine down through Massachusetts, across Connecticut, into the eastern edges of New York. Hundreds of miles of country, all wearing the same brass shadow at the same hour. That detail mattered. Storms do not work like that. Eclipses do not work like that. A storm rolls in from one direction. An eclipse sweeps across the land in a thin line and is gone in minutes. But this darkness had settled like a blanket pulled over a sleeping child, and it covered everything at once. In the State House, the men began to talk of leaving. A few rose to gather their papers. Their hands shook a little, though they tried to hide it. One member, his voice low, suggested that the assembly adjourn at once. Surely no business could be done on such a day. Surely God Himself was speaking through this sky, and men ought to go home to their wives and children and make peace with what was coming. The motion hung in the candle smoke. Some nodded, some closed their eyes. Outside, the brass light deepened towards something darker, something the color of an old penny dropped in mud. Somewhere a church bell began to ring, slow and uncertain, as if the bell ringer himself could not decide whether this was a funeral or a warning. And here the pattern starts to show itself. Up in Boston, the same hour, men were lighting candles in the customs house. In Salem, fishermen were rowing back to harbor through water that looked like spilled ink. In Providence, a printer set down his type and walked outside to stand in the street with his neighbors, all of them staring up at nothing. In Portsmouth, a midwife delivering a baby asked the family to bring more lanterns because she could no longer see her own hands. None of these people knew each other. None of them had any way to send word ahead. The roads were slow, the post even slower, and yet they were all living the same hour in the same way. They were all looking up. They were all reaching for flame. They were all wondering if today was the day the world had been promised would come. The stories rhyme in another way too. Almost every account from almost every town mentions the strange yellow cast that came just before the deep dark, a copper light, a brassy stain, the color of a fire seen through fog. Travelers in Rhode Island spoke of it. Farmers in New Hampshire wrote of it. Sailors 100 miles off the coast saw it on the water. Something vast was happening, and the shape of it was beginning to press through the surface of the day. Back in Hartford, the candles flickered on the long oak tables. The motion to adjourn waited. The men of the Connecticut Assembly sat in their pool of small yellow light, and one among them was about to speak the words that would echo down through American memory for 200 years. Inside the old State House in Hartford, the air had grown heavy as a wet wool coat. Candles burned in iron sconces along the walls. Their small flames trembled and bowed, painting the room in soft amber light. Outside, the sky above Connecticut hung low and brown, the color of weak tea steeped in a copper pot. It was just past 11 in the morning, but the windows looked like they belonged to midnight. The counselors of the upper chambers sat in their long coats and white stockings, gathered around a heavy oak table. Their faces glowed orange in the candlelight. Their wigs, powdered that morning, now looked dull and gray in the strange gloom. Outside the tall windows, the elm trees on the green stood motionless, their leaves dark as wet leather. No bird sang, no wind moved. The only sound was the slow scratch of a quill on parchment and the soft hiss of a tallow candle melting into its dish. Among these men sat Abraham Davenport of Stamford. He was a tall, plain man, somewhere in his middle 60s, with a long Puritan face and eyes the color of cold river stone. He wore a dark coat, simple buckle shoes, and the steady look of someone who had buried his fears a long time ago. Davenport was the son of a minister and the grandson of a minister, and he carried his family's faith like a stone in his pocket, quiet, heavy, and always there. The counselors had been debating a small matter of state business, but the darkness pressing against the windows had begun to climb inside their thoughts. One by one, their voices fell quiet. The candles dripped wax onto the table. Somewhere far off, a church bell rang the wrong hour, struck by some bell ringer who could no longer tell morning from evening. Then a counselor pushed back his chair. He stood up slow, and his shadow stretched long across the wall behind him. He spoke the words that had been crouching in every man's chest all morning. The day of judgment, he said, was either at hand or it was very near. He moved that the council adjourn. Let the men go home to their wives. Let them go home to their children. If the world was ending, let it find them on their knees in their own kitchens, not arguing about township boundaries in a candlelit hall. Several heads nodded. A few of the men reached for their hats. The motion seemed certain to pass. Then Abraham Davenport stood. He stood slowly, the way an old oak rises out of fog. He set both his hands flat on the table. He looked around at the faces of the men he had known for 30 years, and when he spoke, his voice was steady and low, like water moving under ice. The day of judgment, he said, was either approaching or it was not. If it was not, there was no cause for adjournment. If it was, then he chose to be found doing his duty. He therefore moved that candles be brought, so that the council might proceed with its business. The room sat in silence for a long moment. The candles guttered. The brown sky pressed against the glass. And then, one by one, the councilors of Connecticut nodded their heads. A servant was sent for more candles. The clerk dipped his quill. The work of the colony continued on through the strange afternoon, as if the world ending outside the windows were no different than a heavy rain. Those words became the most famous spoken on the dark day. They were carried out of that hall by every man who heard them. They traveled by horseback to Stamford and New Haven and Boston. They were written into letters and copied into diaries. 100 years later, the poet John Greenleaf Whittier would put them into verse, and Davenport's plain New England courage would be remembered in schoolrooms across the country. But here is the curious thing about the story. We do not know, even now, exactly what Davenport thought was happening outside those windows. Some who knew him said he believed it was indeed the end of all things, and simply meant to die at his post. Others said he saw it as nothing more than a strange weather, and refused to be ruled by superstition. The records do not tell us. Davenport himself wrote nothing about that day before he died, 4 years later, on a winter morning in Stamford. What we have is the moment. A small room, the candles burning at noon, an old man standing up in the half-light and choosing his duty over his dread. The rest, like the darkness itself, belongs to mystery. Out on the coast, the men who lived on the water saw something different than the men in the fields. They saw the dark come in from a place the dark should not come from. And what they saw has never been fully explained. A schooner sat off the coast of Massachusetts that morning, her sails slack as bedsheets on a still wash line. The captain, a salt-faced man named Joseph Howe, had spent 40 years reading the moods of the Atlantic. He knew every shade of whether the sky could wear. He knew the green tint before a squall. He knew the bruised gray of a nor'easter coming down from the Grand Banks. He had no name for what he saw that day. The water around the schooner turned the color of cold tea. Then it turned the color of cooling pitch. The sailors stood along the rail and watched the line where sea met sky simply vanish, swallowed by a wall of something that was neither cloud, nor fog, nor smoke alone. The wall moved without wind. It rolled toward them slow as a funeral march. One sailor knelt on the deck and began to pray out loud. Another climbed the rigging to get a better look, then climbed back down without saying a word. The cook, a young man from Marblehead, walked to the captain and asked plainly if this was the day the Lord had promised in the book of Revelation. The captain did not answer him. The captain was watching a single gull fly low across the water, calling and calling, looking for somewhere safe to land. Up and down the New England coast, the same scene played out on different decks. Fishing boats out of Gloucester pulled in their lines and rowed for harbor with backs bent and faces pale. A small sloop near Portsmouth dropped anchor in open water because her captain could no longer see the shore he had sailed past 100 times. Men who feared nothing on the sea found themselves crying like children. The strange detail, the one that does not fit any easy answer, is this: the sailors did not just see the darkness, they felt it. Several logs from that day mention the same thing: a heaviness, a weight pressing down on the chest, as if the air itself had grown thick and slow. One mate aboard a vessel near Cape, Anne wrote that the very rope in his hands seemed to gain pounds, as if the world had grown more serious about gravity. Another sailor said the lanterns they lit on deck burned with a flame that leaned, not from any breeze, but from some quiet pull no one could see. The wood of the masts groaned. The sails hung like wet laundry, though no rain had touched them. A barometer aboard one ship is said to have dropped, risen, then dropped again, ticking back and forth like a man pacing a small room. No storm came, no wind rose, only the dark and the weight and the long, quiet song of water lapping against the hulls. And there is one detail stranger still. Several captains, when they later compared notes in the taverns of Boston and Salem, swore they had seen lights on the water, not the steady glow of another vessel, not the flicker of a distant shore. Small pale lights drifting just above the surface, the color of buttermilk in moonlight. The lights moved with the dark, or perhaps inside it. They came near the ships and then drifted away, and no man could say what they were. A school teacher who later collected sailor accounts wrote them down in a small leather book. He noted that the men who told him these things were not given to fancy. They were men who hauled cod and mended nets and carried scars from real ropes and real storms. They did not see angels in the clouds or mermaids in the foam, but they saw the lights on May 19, 1780, and they spoke of them the way a person speaks of a death in the family, quietly, with careful words, looking down at the table. No volcano explains the lights. No wildfire from Canada explains the weight in the air. No common theory of smoke and soot accounts for what those weathered men felt pressing on their shoulders as they stood on rocking decks and watched a sky no almanac had ever described. The historians have set this part aside, the way you might set aside a puzzle piece that fits nowhere. Maybe the men were frightened. Maybe memory played its old tricks. Or maybe the dark day was wider and stranger than any single answer can hold. Out on the water, something else was happening. And whatever it was, the sailors carried it home in silence. Not everyone in New England believed the sky was speaking to them. Even on that strange afternoon, with candles burning at noon and roosters tucked back in their roosts, there were men and women who looked up at the dark and shook their heads. They were the doubters, the skeptics, the folks who trusted their own eyes more than their neighbors' prayers. You can find their voices in the old letters and journals. A doctor in Newburyport wrote that the darkness was no miracle at all. A merchant in Hartford told his wife to stop her worrying, that it was only weather only smoke, only some trick of the spring air. These were practical people. They knew that strange skies came and went. They had seen red moons and green sunsets. They had watched fog roll in thick enough to lose a horse in. And then, in the middle of that long afternoon, something fell from the clouds that gave even the skeptics pause. It was rain, but it was not the rain they knew. The drops came down slow and heavy, the color of weak tea or old honey. Yellow rain. Witnesses called it sulphurous. They said it left a film on the rain barrels, a thin gold skin that floated on the surface like the scum on a pot of boiling broth. It stained the white linens hung on washing lines. It pooled in the wagon ruts and shone there dull and waxy, like melted candle drippings. The skeptics had explanations. Of course they did. Skeptics always do, and theirs are often the best ones. They said the yellow was pollen. New England in mid-May is thick with it. The pines were shedding their dust by the bucketful that spring, golden clouds drifting out of the woods. Every time the wind moved, pollen mixed with rain would look exactly like what folks described. A pale yellow slick, a sulfur smell. Nothing strange about it, nothing biblical. They said the darkness itself was just a bad storm front, a heavy cloud bank, low and wide, pushing down from the north. They pointed to the smell of burning wood on the air and said sensibly that there must be a fire somewhere. Maybe in the great forests up in Maine, maybe further north, in the country the French had once held. Smoke could travel. Everyone knew that. A barn fire in the next county could thicken the sky for a whole afternoon. These were good arguments. They are still good arguments. Many modern thinkers nod along to them because they fit what we know about pollen and smoke and the way weather behaves. But the skeptics, then and now, run into a wall. The wall is the depth of the dark. A storm makes the sky gray. A thick cloud makes it dim. Pollen yellows the light, but does not steal it. Even the heaviest smoke from a distant fire usually leaves enough sun to read by, enough glow to find your way across a yard. What fell over New England that day was something different. People in well-lit rooms could not see the face of a friend across the table. White paper held to the window looked black. silver coin laid on a sill disappeared into shadow. Some witnesses said the darkness had weight to it, like a wool blanket pressed down on the world. Pollen does not do that. A spring storm does not do that. Smoke from one fire, even a big one, does not do that. And the yellow rain itself had a strangeness the skeptics could not quite scrub away. When folks let it sit in their buckets overnight, a black sediment settled at the bottom. Soot, fine and powdery and dark as ground pepper. Farmers skimmed it off with spoons and rubbed it between their fingers and smelled it. And what they smelled was burned wood, not pine pollen, not sulfur from some underground vent. Burned wood coming down out of the sky in the rain, hundreds of miles from any fire they could name. The skeptics had no answer for the soot. They still don't, not fully. They can say it came from somewhere. They can guess at a fire in Canada, a fire in the Adirondacks, a fire so big and so far that its ashes rode the high winds for days before falling back to earth. They can guess. But on the afternoon of May 19th, no one in New England knew of such a fire. No traveler had ridden in with news of it. No glow had been seen on the northern horizon the night before. The yellow rain fell. The black soot settled. And even the doubters, wiping their hands on their aprons, went quiet for a moment and looked up. There were people who saw the soot, people who knelt down by ponds and pulled it up on their fingers and looked at it in the pale yellow light and knew. They did not need a scientist to tell them. They did not need a preacher. They had grown up close to the land, and the land was speaking to them in a language they understood. In small towns across Massachusetts and New Hampshire, farmers walked out into their fields the next morning and found a thin gray film on every flat surface. It coated the rain barrels. It floated on the horse troughs like dust on still water. It clung to the last patches of snowmelt in the shaded hollows where winter still hid. The film smelled like a campfire long gone cold. It smelled like the inside of a chimney. And it tasted, when one brave child pressed a tongue to a finger, exactly like burnt wood. These were the believers, not believers in judgment, not believers in prophecy, but believers in the simple, plain truth of what their senses told them. Something far away had burned, something enormous, and the sky had carried the proof of it right to their doorsteps. A miller in western Connecticut wrote a short note in the margin of his account book. He said the ash on his pond was thick enough to skim with a wooden spoon. He said he had seen forest fires before, the small kind that took a few acres of pine, and the ash from those fires had blown into his yard a day later. This ash was the same, only finer, only paler, only there was so very much of it. He drew no grand conclusion. He simply wrote what he saw and signed his name and went back to grinding corn. A woman in Rhode Island told her grandchildren years later that she had filled a glass jar with the strange water from her well basin. She kept it on a shelf above her kitchen hearth for the rest of her life. The soot settled to the bottom in a dark gray ring, and the water above it grew clear as glass. She would point to it sometimes when company came. This, she would say, is what fell from the sky on the dark day. This is what I gathered with my own 2 hands. And nobody who saw the jar ever argued with her. The believers were quiet people, mostly. They were not the ones writing pamphlets or preaching from pulpits. They were the ones who had spent their whole lives reading the weather in the shape of a cloud and the smell of the wind. They knew the difference between a coming storm and a coming snow without ever looking up. And they knew what burnt forest smelled like, because some of them had set the fires themselves to clear new land. Their certainty cost them something. In a time when ministers were warning of judgment, and almanacs were full of solemn prediction. The quiet farmer who said it was only smoke from a far-off fire could sound foolish, even disrespectful. Some of them were laughed at in the meeting house. Some of them were scolded by their own wives for refusing to kneel and pray when the dark came down. One man in Vermont, by his own account, was asked to leave his pew for muttering that the whole thing was just wood burning somewhere up north. But they gained something too. They gained the quiet pride of a person who trusts their own eyes. They gained the comfort of a world that still made sense, where smoke came from fire and fire came from trees, and the universe was not, after all, breaking apart above their heads. While their neighbors lay awake trembling, these people slept. They had read the ash. They knew. And in the years that followed, as the dark day faded into story, it was these quiet believers whose words held up best. Their letters and their diary scraps and their margin notes spoke of soot and ash and the smell of pine. They had not guessed at angels. They had not summoned demons. They had reported plainly and patiently what the ponds and the snowmelt and the rain barrels had shown them. 200 years later, when scientists finally went looking for what had darkened the sky, the first thing they would search for was exactly what those farmers had described. A great burning, a long plume of smoke, ash carried for hundreds of miles on a steady wind. The believers had been right all along. They had simply been right too early and in too soft a voice for the world to hear them yet. The afternoon had been strange. The sky had gone copper, and then green, and then the color of wet slate. But the night that followed was something else entirely. The night that fell on New England on May 19, 1780, was a night the land itself would not forget. People who lived through it spoke of it for the rest of their lives. They called it a darkness you could feel on your skin, a darkness with weight, a darkness that seemed to press against the windows of the small wooden houses, asking to come in. The moon was full that night. It should have lit the fields like a silver lantern. It should have made the white birches glow against the pine forests and turned every pond into a mirror. Instead, the moon vanished. Folks walked outside and held their hands in front of their faces and saw nothing. Not a shadow, not an outline, just black. A man in Massachusetts wrote that he could not see a sheet of white paper held 6 inches from his eyes. A woman in New Hampshire said the air felt thick as river mud. A farmer in Vermont stepped onto his porch with a lantern and watched the light fall straight down to his boots, as if the dark had cut it off at the knees. The land soaked all of it in, and in some places, people swear the land remembers still. Walk through the old hill country of central Connecticut today, and the locals will point you to certain meadows. Quiet pieces of ground where nothing seems quite right. Farmers say the soil there grows thin grass. The deer step around it. Crows wheel above it and keep going. There is no name for what happened in those fields, but the families who have worked the land for 240 years will tell you their grandfathers told them to plant elsewhere. Up near the Berkshire Hills, there is a grove of old hemlocks that scientists studied not long ago. The rings inside their trunks tell a story. The year 1780 shows a strange, thin band, a pause in the tree's growth, like the tree itself had held its breath. The rings before are wide and green. The rings after are wide and green. But that one year, the wood is pinched and pale, the color of bone left in the sun. Foresters call these marks event years. They appear in trees all across New England, in the white pines along the Merrimack, in the sugar maples of the Green Mountains, in the oaks that still stand in the old burial yards of coastal Maine. Every one of them carries that thin scar from 1780. The land wrote the date into its own body. There are stranger stories too. In a little valley in southern New Hampshire, there is a piece of ground where no foundation will hold. Builders have tried. The first house went up in the 1790s and tilted within a season. Another was raised in the 1840s, and the floorboards cracked before the family could move in. The old-timers say it is because the ground there shifted on the dark day, sunk a half-inch, and never came back up. Whether that is true or just a story passed from porch to porch, no one can prove. But the lot sits empty now, ringed by wild blueberry and lichen-covered stone. A small river in western Massachusetts is said to have changed its course that week. Locals tell of a bend that wasn't there before May. Maps from the 1760s show the water running straight. Maps from the 1790s show it curling east around a low rise. Whether the soot-thick rain swelled the banks, or whether the story is folklore stitched onto an ordinary flood, the river kept its new path, and there are animals. Old farmers in the Connecticut River Valley speak of certain pastures where the cows still will not lie down. The herd will graze, drink, wander, but when evening comes they move on. They sleep elsewhere. The grandfathers say their grandfathers said it began the night the dark would not lift. The cows remember, or rather, the cows have always been taught by the cows before them, in the silent way animals teach, that This ground is not for resting. These are the things the land holds. Not facts you can write in a book. Not proof you can take to a courtroom. Just the slow, patient memory of a place that lived through something it did not understand. The trees keep their scars. The fields keep their silences. And on certain May nights, when the wind smells faintly of pine smoke, the old people pause on their porches and listen. When the sun finally bled back into the sky over New England, the night that followed was its own kind of strange. The moon rose late that evening, climbing slow above the trees. People who saw it never forgot the color. It was not silver. It was not white. It hung in the sky like a copper coin pulled fresh from a fire, glowing the soft, dull red of a banked ember. Old men called it a blood moon. Children pressed their faces to cold window glass and stared up at it. Some folks thought the moon itself had caught the same sickness as the sun. Others believed it was the final sign, the last lantern before the long dark. But here is the thing worth saying. That moon and that sun and that whole long day of swallowed light were not the first of their kind in America. They were not the last either. Go back to the colonial records of October 1716. New Englanders wrote of a day when the sky turned the color of weak tea and the air smelled of smoke that came from nowhere. Cotton Mather himself put pen to paper about it. He called it a wonder. He could not say what caused it. The records say candles were lit at noon, then 2. Though the darkness lifted faster than it would in 1780. Travel forward to October 1785. Just 5 years after the dark day, a second strange dimming rolled across the same hills. Folks who had lived through the first one shook their heads and whispered that it was happening again. This time the gloom was thinner, the yellow light less heavy, but the pattern was the same. A sky that forgot how to be a sky. Then came September 1881, more than a century later, in the upper Midwest and into Canada. They called it the Yellow Day. The sun turned brassy and pale, and the world below took on the strange greenish glow of pond water. People in Michigan and Ontario wrote letters describing the same things the New Englanders had written about. Birds going to roost, cattle drifting home from pasture, lamps lit at the dinner table, while the clock said it was still afternoon. And in September 1950, a great smoky haze drifted down from forest fires burning in Alberta. The sun above Pennsylvania looked like a purple bruise. In some Pennsylvania towns, the streetlights came on at midday. The moon that night, when it finally rose, hung blue and ghostly, the color of old denim. So you see, the dark day of 1780 was not alone. It was part of a long, quiet family of strange skies stretching across the American story. Every one of these days carried the same small details, the same animals confused, the same farmers leaving their plows in the fields, the same sense among ordinary people that something old and unknowable had passed between them and the sun. And in every one of these stories, the moon that followed wore some color it had no business wearing. Red, copper, blue, brass. The folklore of the country is full of these moments. In the Appalachians, old-timers spoke of dark afternoons when the hollows filled with shadow and the dogs would not bark. In the Ozarks, people told of a yellow day before the Civil War when their grandmothers gathered everyone into the parlor and read scripture by tallow light. Down in Louisiana, bayou stories speak of a noon hour when the cypress trees seemed to bend toward the dark, and the gators slipped underwater and did not rise for hours. Each region keeps its own version. Each family carries its own piece. And somewhere in the long memory of the land, these days link up like beads on a string, each one a small reminder that the sky is not as steady as we like to believe. What ties them together is the question itself. None of these dark days were ever fully explained at the time they happened. Each generation reached for the tools and theories it had. Some called it judgment. Some called it omen. Some called it haze. Some called it wildfire. The dark day of 1780 just happened to fall in a moment when America was paying close attention. And so it became the one that history wrote down with the heaviest ink. But the others are there, waiting in old letters and faded almanacs, waiting in family stories told on porches in the long blue evenings of summer. The blood moon of 1780 was not a single strange thing. It was one verse in a longer song. The country has been singing for as long as people have looked up and wondered what kind of light they were standing under. Almanacs were the holy books of the working farmer in 1780. They told you when to plant, when to harvest, when the moon would be full, and when the tides would turn. Every kitchen had one hanging from a nail by the hearth. Every barn had one tucked into a beam, the pages soft as old cloth from years of thumbing. Folks trusted them the way they trusted the seasons themselves. So when May 19th came and went, people opened their almanacs that night by candlelight and looked for an answer. They found nothing, not a mention, not a warning, not even a hint that the sun might dim or the noon might turn to midnight. The almanacs of 1780 are quiet on the matter, and that silence is its own kind of evidence. You can still find these old books in libraries from Boston down to Hartford. The paper is yellowed like weak tea, and the ink has faded to the color of dried river mud. Some of them carry handwritten notes in the margins, scrawled by the farmer who owned the book, and in the margin beside May 19, you sometimes find a single word written in shaky brown ink. Dark, just that. One word pressed into the paper by a hand that did not know what else to say. A few of these almanacs are kept under glass now in small town museums. The old Sturbridge collection holds one. The Connecticut Historical Society holds another. A third sits in a private collection near Ipswich, its leather cover cracked like old riverbed clay. The owners do not let many people touch them. The paper is too thin, the ink too tired. Letters survived too, hundreds of them. Folded squares of rag paper sealed with wax the color of dried blood, sent from one cousin to another, from a son in the militia to his mother back home. Most of these letters were about ordinary things: the price of salt, a new calf, a wedding planned for June. But scattered through these everyday notes, like dark stones in a clear stream, you find one line. Sometimes, too, mention of the dark day. A woman named Lydia mostly wrote to her sister in Providence on May 23rd. She spent most of the letter complaining about her landlord. Then, near the bottom, almost as an afterthought, she added that the sun had gone out 4 days before. She wrote it plain. The way you might write that it had rained, as if there were no words big enough to make it mean more. A blacksmith in Worcester wrote to his brother in Albany and described how his forge fire glowed bright as a small sun, while the noon outside stayed black as a closed barn. He said the iron looked strange in his hands. The orange of the heated metal seemed to bleed across the dim shop like spilled honey on dark wood. He kept the letter short. He did not know how to explain what he had seen. Some objects survived that are harder to look at. There is a butter churn in a Vermont museum, plain pine, whooped with iron, the lid stained dark from years of use. The plaque next to it tells the story. The woman who owned it carved a date into the bottom of the churn with the point of a knife. May 19, 1780. Below the date, she carved 3 small lines, like rays from a sun, and then a single jagged shape that some say is a tree, and some say is a hand. Nobody knows why she carved it. She left no diary. Her name is half worn from the plaque, but the churn sits there behind its glass, the wood pale as old bone, and the carving is real. You can see it. You can run your eyes along the cuts and feel that a real woman on a real day took the trouble to mark the moment on the thing she touched most often. Pulpit Bibles from 1780 sometimes carry pressed flowers between their pages. Violets mostly, wild apple blossoms, spring things gathered by parishioners and forgotten there. In a Bible from a small church in Topsfield, Massachusetts, a flower was pressed at the page for the book of Joel. The page describes the sun being turned to darkness and the moon to blood. The flower is the kind that bloomed in mid-May. The page is the page a preacher would have turned to on a day when noon went black. These things are not proof of any one theory. They are not proof of fire or volcano or omen. They are only the small, quiet objects a strange day left behind. And the Almanacs, which should have known, said nothing at all. In the years after the dark day, the story did not stay locked in diaries or printed almanacs. It moved into kitchens. It moved into parlors. It traveled from grandfather to grandson, the way good stories always do, told beside wood stoves on winter nights, with the kettle hissing and the wind pressing soft against the windows. The preachers carried it first. In the months that followed May of 1780, ministers across New England climbed into their pulpits and pointed back to that strange copper sky. They said it was a warning. They said it was a sign that heaven still spoke to those who would listen. Pamphlets rolled off small wooden presses in Boston and Hartford, their pages thin and rough, the ink smelling of lampblack and oil. The covers showed crude woodcuts of a black sun hanging over a quiet village. Inside, the words were thick with verses and trembling certainty. Some of these pamphlets survive. You can find them tucked behind glass in old libraries, their paper the color of weak tea, their edges soft as cloth. The titles are long and breathless, the way titles were in those days, full of warnings and promises. Many were written by men who had stood in their own dooryards at noon and watched the chickens shuffle off to roost. They wrote about the smell of smoke. They wrote about the silver of the moon turning to copper. They wrote like men who had been changed. In the homes, the story took a quieter shape. Families remembered where they were. A mother nursing a baby by an open window. A boy fetching water from a stone well. A grandfather mending a fence near the apple trees. These little details became the bones of the family story, and each generation added a careful layer of skin over them. The baby grew up and told her own children. Those children told theirs. By the time the Civil War rolled across the country, there were New Englanders who could tell you exactly which pasture their great-grandfather had been standing in when the sky turned the color of an old penny. Some details polished themselves smooth with time. The exact hour the candles were lit. The exact prayer the family said at the table. Other details quietly fell away. The arguments between neighbors about what it meant. The frightened sermons that turned out to be wrong about the end of the world. Those parts were less comfortable, so they faded, the way embarrassing memories always do in family stories. But the core stayed. The core was simple. The day the sky went dark. The day the roosters crowed at noon. The day grandfather lit a candle for breakfast. That part never changed, because that part was too strange and too true to lose. By the 1800s, the dark day had become a kind of family heirloom across across New England. Children in Connecticut grew up hearing about Abraham Davenport and his famous words. Children in Massachusetts grew up hearing about the cows that came home early. Children in New Hampshire grew up hearing about the yellow rain that fell on the river ice. The story spread out and softened like cream stirred into coffee, but it never disappeared. Traveling preachers kept it alive too. They moved from town to town with their saddlebags and their worn black books, and they used the dark day as a kind of standing example, proof that the world could still surprise you, proof that the heavens could still hush a whole countryside at noon. Their pamphlets passed from hand to hand, read by candlelight, then tucked into Bibles for safekeeping. Some of those Bibles still sit on shelves today, with the brittle pamphlets folded inside, the creases worn thin from being opened and refolded over 2 centuries. Then came the holiday tables, Thanksgiving suppers in Vermont farmhouses, the windows fogged from the heat of the roast, the candles burning low. Christmas evenings in Maine, with snow piled against the door, and the smell of cider hanging in the warm air. Someone, an aunt, an uncle, an old cousin, would lean back and say, "You know, great-great-grandmother was alive that day." And the children would lean in, and the story would begin again, a little older, a little smoother, but still recognizable as the same dark sky. This is how legends keep their shape in America. Not through history books, but through families. Not through scholars, but through the slow, patient telling, year after year, around tables and beside fires. The dark day of 1780 survived because people loved telling it. And in the telling, it became something more than weather. It became a piece of who they were. There is another set of voices in this story, and they are the voices we hear the least. The native peoples of New England had been on this land for thousands of years before the colonists wrote their diaries and printed their pamphlets. The Abenaki, the Wampanoag, the Mohegan, the Pequot, the Nipmuc, the Pennacook. They knew this sky. They knew this air. They knew the way smoke moves over a long valley and the way ash falls on still water. And on May 19, 1780, they were there too, watching the same darkness come down over the same hills. But almost none of their words survived. chroniclers who scribbled by candlelight that afternoon were ministers and assemblymen and farmers with good pens. The native communities of 1780 had been broken open by 150 years of war, disease, and forced removal. Their elders were fewer. Their gathering places were smaller. The pamphlets and almanacs that carried the dark day into history did not stop at their doors. So what they said about it, what they thought, what they remembered, lives mostly in the soft place between oral memory and silence. A few fragments slipped through. There are scattered notes in the records of mission towns and trading posts. There are passing lines in the diaries of colonists who happened to ask a neighbor what the old people thought. And the picture that comes through those scraps is not the picture of Judgment Day. It is something quieter. It is the picture of a sky that had darkened before. Not like this, perhaps, not this deep, but the smoke of great fires far to the north was not unknown to people who had lived along these rivers for generations. The forests of the Northeast burned often in the old time. Lightning came down in the dry months and set the duff smoldering. Some native communities used fire themselves, gently, to clear underbrush and call the deer into the open meadows. They knew the smell of burning pine the way a baker knows the smell of bread. They knew that when the wind came down out of Canada, heavy and yellow, somewhere up there, a long stretch of the world was on fire. The colonists, newer to the land, read the same sky and reached for the book of Revelation. The older peoples read it and reached for memory. This is not to say the dark day meant nothing to them. It almost certainly did. A noon turned to midnight is a heavy thing for any soul under any sky. But the framing was different. There were no printing presses turning out broadsides in Abenaki. There were no sermons preached from raised pulpits to congregations of 300. Whatever stories were told that night were told around small fires, in small rooms, in languages the historians of Boston and Hartford did not bother to learn. And those stories went where most spoken stories go. Into the children, into the grandchildren, and then slowly into the long quiet. What we are left with is a hole in the record, a hole the shape of a whole people's experience of one of the strangest days in American history. We can guess at its edges. We can read the few scraps that survived. We can listen to the descendants who still carry pieces of the old knowledge today, who still speak of the great northern fires and the way the sky used to change when the woods burned far away. But we cannot reach back and ask the elders of 1780 what they thought as the chickens went to roost at noon. That conversation is gone, and maybe that is the quiet truth underneath all the louder ones. The dark day was not one event. It was many events happening at the same time in different minds under the same sky. To the Connecticut assemblyman, it was a test of duty. To the farmer in his field, it was a sign from God. To the sailor on the coast, it was the end of the world. To the native grandmother in a small house by a river, it may have been a memory waking up, a thing she had heard about as a child, a thing the land had done before. All of these are true. None of them is the whole. The mystery is not just what darkened the sky. The mystery is also who got to tell the story afterward, and who did not, and what we lost when only some of the voices made it onto the page. The day belonged to everyone who stood under it. The history, mostly, belonged to the ones with ink. And somewhere between those two facts, the real shape of May 19, 1780, still waits, half in shadow, like the day itself. Step out of your warm kitchen now. Step out the back door, down the wooden steps, and into the soft grass of a New England night in late May. The year does not matter. The year is every year. The dark day has passed, and the sun set hours ago, and the world has settled into its slow nighttime breathing. You are standing in a field at the edge of an old farm. The trees begin where the field ends, and the trees know things you do not. The air smells of cool earth and wet stone. There is a faint sweetness too, the green sweetness of new leaves just unfolded. Somewhere a frog clicks once, then twice, then falls quiet. The grass under your bare feet is damp and a little cold. A single white moth drifts past your shoulder like a scrap of paper carried on a slow river of air. Look up. The sky tonight is the sky the farmers waited for. After the strange morning, after the copper light and the candles burning at noon, after the cows wandering home and the preachers shouting from their pulpits. This is what finally came: a clean black sky, stars laid out like spilled sugar on dark cloth, the whole great wheel of them turning so slowly you cannot see it move, but you know it does. There is a pine tree at the corner of the field. It is taller than the house behind you. Its trunk is wide enough that 3 children holding hands could not reach around it. This tree was already old when the dark day came. Its rings remember. Deep inside the wood, in a thin band laid down that strange spring, there is a story written in carbon and ash. Scientists would not learn to read those rings for another 200 years. But the tree wrote it down anyway, patient as stone. A small breeze moves through the upper branches. The needles whisper to one another in that soft, hissing voice pines have. It sounds like the sea heard from far away. You close your eyes for a moment and listen. The pine remembers smoke drifting from the north. The pine remembers the noon that turned to dusk. The pine remembers the silence of birds that did not sing. Open your eyes. Let them adjust. The Milky Way is a pale river poured across the middle of the sky. It runs from one black horizon to the other, soft as a smear of chalk. You can see the dark dust lanes inside it now, the places where the river bends and parts. A meteor scratches a quick white line above the trees and is gone before you can lift your hand. Somewhere far off, an owl calls twice. A long pause, then once more. The land here is gentle. Low stone walls run through the woods, walls built by hands 2 centuries gone. The stones are furred with green moss and pale lichen. In the dark, you can only feel them, cool and rough under your palm. Farmers stacked these stones when they cleared these fields. Some of those same farmers stood in this field on May 19th and looked up at a sky the color of an old penny and wondered if the Lord had come at last. You can almost feel them standing beside you, not as ghosts, as neighbors, quiet company in the dark. A cool current of air slides down from the hills. It carries the smell of balsam fir, sharp and clean. Far off, you hear water. A small brook running over stones somewhere beyond the trees. The sound is steady, endless. The same sound it made the night before the dark day and the night after. The stars over your head are the same stars the colonists saw, the same stars Abraham Davenport rode home under after he refused to adjourn the assembly, the same stars the sailors saw when the strange darkness finally lifted from the coast and the lanterns swung again from the rigging. Light from those stars left them a long time ago and is only now arriving here, touching the field, touching your upturned face. You feel small, but it is a good smallness, the kind that makes a person calm instead of afraid. You are one quiet animal standing in a quiet field, under a sky that has held this same shape for longer than any human story. The pine creaks softly. The brook keeps running. The owl calls once more, and then is done for the night. The mystery of that strange morning long ago has not been solved. It is only sleeping here in the rings of the old trees, waiting in the dark. For more than 2 centuries, the people of New England carried the dark day with them like a small, smooth stone in a pocket. They did not always speak of it. They did not need to. The story sat quietly in the bones of the old towns, passed down at kitchen tables and around wood stoves, told to grandchildren who looked up wide-eyed at the ordinary blue sky and tried to picture it gone. And then, slowly, the story began to point north. Long before any scientist confirmed it, the farmers of Vermont and New Hampshire and Maine had their suspicions. They knew the smell of burning pine. They knew the way ash drifted on the wind. The older folks remembered seeing the sun turn orange during summer haze, when fires burned far off in the great northern forests. They put it together the way country people always put things together, slowly, by feel, by season, by gut. The trouble came from up in Canada. The trouble came from the long green wilderness of the Algonquin lands, where the trees grew thick as fur, and the lightning danced for weeks in spring. This was the legacy, then, of the dark day in those old New England towns. Not fear, not warning. A quiet understanding that the world is stitched together by invisible threads, and that smoke from a forest 1,000 miles away can blot out your noon. It became a kind of folk wisdom, a way of looking at the sky and knowing the sky has a long memory. In small towns like Hardwick and Brimfield and Peacham, the date of May 19th slipped into local memory in soft ways. Some churches held quiet services on the anniversary, especially in the years right after. Preachers used the story for generations as a reminder of humility. School teachers passed out copies of the old poem about Abraham Davenport and asked their pupils to read it aloud. Children memorized the lines about candles and duty until the words sat in them like seeds. You can still find traces of it if you know where to look. Old town histories printed in the 1800s give the dark day its own chapter, with careful lists of who lit candles when, and who walked home from the fields, and who sat in the meeting house waiting for the trumpet. Family Bibles carry the date written in faded ink. A diary in a museum in Connecticut has a single line that reads, simply, "The day the sun forgot." That is the way these towns remember things. Not in monuments, in margins. A few country fairs in New England still tip their hat to the dark day every May. In some villages, there is a tradition of lighting a single candle in the window on the 19th, just at noon, and letting it burn for an hour. Nobody quite remembers when the custom started. Nobody quite remembers why. The candles burn anyway, small yellow flames against the bright spring light, and the people who light them feel a little closer to something old. The Fires Up in Canada have a legacy of their own. Modern researchers walking through the boreal forests of Ontario and Quebec have found the scars in the tree rings, the burn layers in the soil, the long evidence of a spring that went up in flames. The land remembers what the journals only guessed at. Whole stretches of forest were eaten and then reborn, and the new trees that grew in the ash carry the date in their wood. This is the part of the story that took the longest to arrive. For 200 years, the people of New England had a mystery. They knew the smell of smoke. They knew the taste of soot on the rain. They suspected the answer lay somewhere north, in the great quiet country of pine and birch and lake. But suspicion is not proof. And so the story stayed soft, stayed open, stayed the kind of mystery that gets told slowly by a grandfather while the wood stove ticks. What grew from the dark day was not a festival exactly, and not a holiday, and not a tourist sign on the side of the road. What grew was something quieter, a way of looking at weather, a way of looking at smoke on the horizon, a way of teaching children that the sky is bigger than the town, and the wind is older than the country, and a forest fire in another nation can dim your noon if it wants to. In the old New England towns, people still know this. They look at the spring sky a little longer than other folks do. They notice the color of the sun. They remember. For 200 years, the dark day sat in old diaries and yellowed sermon books, gathering dust in attics across New England. The story moved with the people who carried it. And one of those people was a young researcher named Aaron McMurray, who grew up far from the pine woods where the sky once turned black. She heard the tale first from her grandmother, who heard it from hers, in a long thread of women passing down a wonder. Her family had left Massachusetts generations back, drifting west the way so many families drifted, chasing land and weather and second chances. They settled finally in Missouri, in a small house on a quiet road. But the dark day came with them, tucked between the pages of a family Bible like a pressed flower. Aaron used to picture it as a child. Candles flickering on breakfast tables. Roosters confused by a noon that looked like midnight. Cows wandering home through fields the color of old tea. The story had a flavor in her mouth, smoky and sweet, like burnt sugar. She went on to study tree rings at the University of Missouri. The work is called dendrochronology, and it is a slow, patient art. You take thin cores from old trees, and you read the rings the way you might read a journal written in wood. Wide rings for good years, thin rings for hard ones, dark scars for fires, pale bands for frost. Each tree is a library, and each library remembers what the people forgot. For years, she studied trees in places nobody bothered with. Old growth stands in Ontario. Boreal pines up near the Algonquin Highlands. Red pines older than any colony, older than the founding of any nation. Their bark thick and craggy as a mountain face. She would hike in with a small crew, drill quiet samples no thicker than a pencil, and pack them out in cardboard tubes. Back in the lab, under soft yellow light, she lined up the cores on long wooden trays. She counted. She measured. cataloged burn scars by the hundreds, by the thousands. And one spring, while squinting through a hand lens at a sample of red pine from a stand near Lake Nipissing, she noticed something, a scar from 1780. Then another, in tree after tree, across hundreds of miles of forest. The wood remembered a fire so vast it had touched nearly every old pine in a swath, the size of a small country. The rings told her the burn had peaked in the late spring. The exact season the candles had burned at noon in Massachusetts. She sat back in her chair. The lab was quiet. Somewhere outside, a cardinal was singing. The story her grandmother had whispered. The story passed down through women in dark kitchens with damp aprons, lined up perfectly with the scars in the wood. The great Algonquin fires of 1780 had thrown up a column of smoke so wide and so high that the upper winds had carried it south and east, hundreds of miles, across Lake Ontario, across the Berkshires, across the Connecticut River, until it spread over New England like a black wool blanket and turned the sun the color of dull copper. The work was published in 2008. Quietly, in a scientific paper few outside the field would read. But for Aaron, sitting in Missouri so far from where any of it happened, it felt less like a discovery and more like a homecoming. The legend she had carried since childhood now had bones inside it. Trees had agreed with her grandmother. The wood had spoken for the dead. Other scientists still argue, of course. Some say fog and low cloud played their part. Some say a thin volcanic haze may have thickened the gloom. Some say the smoke alone cannot fully account for how dark it became, how the chickens slept, how readers could not see a page held an inch from their nose. The mystery has loosened, but it has not fully untied. Still, Aaron's trees gave the dark day something it had never quite had before. A return address. A place the smoke had come from. A wide green country in the north where lightning struck dry pine and the flames climbed and the wind carried the proof south to fall as soot on Connecticut snowmelt. She kept her grandmother's old Bible on her desk after that. Inside it, on a thin slip of paper, were the words a great-great-grandmother had written one Sunday long ago. Just a date and a small sentence. May 19, 1780. The day the sun forgot to shine. The wood, 2 centuries later, had whispered back. Something strange happens to a story when it lives long enough. The hard edges soften. The dates blur. The names of the towns and the preachers and the farmers slip out of the telling. And what stays behind is the shape of the thing. A morning that forgot to begin. A noon as dark as midnight. Candles on a kitchen table while the rooster crowed in confusion outside the window. That is what the dark day became as the years rolled on. Not a date in a book. A feeling passed from one porch to the next. For a long time, the people who lived through it kept the memory sharp. They told their children. The children told their grandchildren. The grandchildren wrote letters and printed pamphlets and pressed yellowed clippings between the pages of family Bibles. You can still find those Bibles in attics across New England. The paper thin as moth wings, the ink the color of weak tea, and tucked inside sometimes a single line in faded handwriting. The day the sun went out, 19th of May, 1780. But paper does not last forever, and memory, even passed down with care, begins to bend. Somewhere around the time the railroads came, the dark day started to feel less like history and more like a tale, the kind of thing an old man told on a winter evening when the wood stove was hot and the cider was warm and the wind was scraping at the shutters. He would lean forward, his face lit orange by the coals, and he would say it just the way his grandfather had said it. The birds went quiet. The cows came home. The sky turned the color of an old copper kettle left out in the rain. And the children listening would not quite know if they believed him. That is the strange place where the dark day lives now. Half in the record, half in the firelight. You can drive through those same towns today and find no marker, no bronze plaque on a courthouse lawn, no museum with a careful little exhibit behind glass. The villages where farmers once lit candles at breakfast look like any other New England villages. White churches, stone walls running through second-growth woods, maple trees turning red in October, a diner on the main road. Nothing to tell you that on a Friday in May, 2.5 centuries ago, the people who walked these streets believed the world was ending, and yet the story has not died. It surfaces in unexpected places. A line in a poem, a footnote in a sermon, a passage in an old novel where a character remembers, with a shiver, what her grandmother told her. The dark day keeps slipping out of the history books and into the softer country of folklore, where it sits beside the white deer and the headless horseman, and the ghost lights over the swamps. Maybe that is where it always wanted to be, because folklore does something history cannot. Folklore lets the mystery stay a mystery. It does not demand an answer. It does not need a chart of wind patterns, or a study of tree rings, or a careful map of Canadian wildfires. It only asks you to listen and to remember and to wonder. And the wonder is the part that lasts. Long after the soot has washed away, long after the almanacs have crumbled, long after the last person who knew someone who lived through it has been laid in the ground. The wonder remains, because somewhere inside the story there is a question that science has answered without really answering at all. Yes, the smoke came from the north. Yes, the fires were enormous. Yes, the air was thick and the conditions were rare. All of that is true, and none of it explains the silence. None of it explains why the chickens went to roost, why the moon at midnight looked like a coin dipped in blood, why grown men in powdered wigs stood up in the Connecticut Assembly and spoke of judgment, why the cows walked home from the pastures as though some old animal knowledge had told them the day was finished before it had finished. There is a part of the dark day that the smoke cannot reach, a part that lives in the way people felt when the sky closed over them like a slow gray lid. That part has no theory. That part has no end. That part is the open door at the back of the story, and the wind keeps blowing through it, gentle and steady, year after year, carrying the smell of burning pine from somewhere far away that nobody can quite see. And so we come back slowly, the way you come back from a long walk in the woods. The story is told. The candles have burned down. The morning of May 19, 1780, sits where it has always sat, folded into the soft pages of an old country's memory, neither solved nor forgot. In the old towns of New England, the dark day still means something, not in a loud way, not in a way that gets printed on signs or sold on postcards. It lives in quieter places. It lives in the corner of a town library where a glass case holds a yellowed almanac. It lives on a brass plaque bolted to a Connecticut stone, weathered green by 200 springs. It lives in the way a grandmother in Hartford tilts her head at a strange sky and says, soft as a prayer, that her great-great-grandfather saw a day just like this once. Drive through those old villages now, and you can feel it. The white clapboard churches still stand on the same greens. The maples still arch over the same lanes. Stone walls still wander through the woods, marking fields that nobody plows anymore. The land remembers in its own slow language. The trees that grew through that strange darkness are long gone, but their children's children still rise from the same soil, drinking the same rain. In Stamford, the courthouse where Abraham Davenport made his quiet stand has changed 100 times over. New beams, new roofs, new voices in the chamber. But the words he spoke still drift through the place like wood smoke that never quite clears. Bring in the candles. Do the work that is in front of you. Whatever the sky chooses to do your part. It is a small lesson and a large one, and the old towns keep it tucked in their pockets. The mystery itself stays open. The wildfires in the Algonquin forests are the strongest guess, and modern science has stitched together a careful case from ash layers and tree rings and old wind patterns. But there is still room at the table for other ideas. A volcano nobody recorded. A fog the like of which has not returned. A meeting of weather and smoke and dust that lined up only once and may never line up again. Pick the theory that pleases you. The day itself does not seem to care. What feels true is this. On a Friday in late spring, the people of New England looked up and saw something they could not name. Some of them prayed. Some of them lit candles. Some of them simply went back to their fields, or their forges, or their ledgers. They lived through it. They wrote it down in shaky ink. They passed the story to their children, who passed it to theirs, who passed it to the people who passed it to you tonight. That is how a country keeps its strange days alive. Not in textbooks, in kitchens, in porch swings, in the low voice of someone